Call this meeting of the Higher Education Subcommittee of Appropriations to order. Delegate Rodman. And ma'am, if you would, please state your bill and tell us what it does.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am bringing up HB 1425. This is a bill to allow Virginia higher ed education systems to have what we call tuition remission or tuition waivers. So faculty's children can go to the university and either all dependent on the school's decisions on how they do it, on either a discounted or a full rate of tuition allowance, so their children can go to school at the same university they work at, or in an exchange program. Our school system is highlighted, in Virginia by qualified and passionate group of professors and faculty. I'm a college professor, as many of you know myself, and I know the importance on growing and maintaining a hardworking staff that benefits the student body. But if the Commonwealth plans to continue to attract and retain top faculty members, we really need to give the universities the option to offer what are really considered pretty standard benefits. 90% of most universities offer tuition remission. HB 1425 proposes amending the code to include a provision that may provide faculty and institutions with full or partial tuition benefit for dependent children. This bill simply clarifies in the code the ability of our public institutions to decide for themselves. It doesn't come from the general fund. We're giving the power to the universities to act upon this bill and implement this as they see fit. It can exponentially improve our ability to compete with growing standards of higher education. I urge you to support this bill. I have Brian Turner from the American Association of University Professors, and Carmen Rodriguez from VCU as well for questions. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I myself was a beneficiary of tuition remission. My parents were professors, and I waged my way through college. I couldn't have gone to college without tuition remission.
Thank you, Delegate Rob. Anyone like to speak in favor of this proposal? Please come up and state your name and if you're representing an organization.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Brian Turner. I am with the American Association of University Professors. I'm also a professor at Randolph-Macon College, where we do have tuition remission for our employees, exchange program with the other private institutions. As Delegate Rodman said, this is a very common benefit around the country. I'm a department chair, so when I'm hiring faculty members, the fact that I can offer the fact that we do have tuition remission if they have young children. Of course, we don't ask those questions in the hiring process, but if they do have young children, that can be a very attractive way to compete with other institutions that are attempting to hire these people, and more importantly, really to retain them. I've just heard in the last couple of days from department chairs in STEM programs at VCU who are competing, I won't name the programs or the institutions, but they're competing with institutions that do offer this, and they have lost a potential hire and are fearing that they're going to fail to retain one of their current faculty members who are looking for this particular kind of benefit. The impact statement provided by Legislative Services is, I think, quite accurate, but it doesn't quite capture the fact of turnover. We're trying to hire yet another new faculty member. When you lose someone or fail to hire somebody who's very, very qualified, there are costs to that as well. So we're hoping that you will support this bill. Again, it delegates to the administrations of the institutions whether or not to adopt a remission program and how to adjust that meets their needs, but it will clarify for those institutions how they can become more competitive with the major researching universities around the country. Thank you.
My name is Carmen Rodriguez. I am a biology professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I would like for you to please support Bill 1425. We have seen in our department, in the biology department, actually had a top candidate, and she actually ended up going to the University of Delaware, even though she already was teaching at Richard Bland University. We were trying to attract her over to BCU, but she ended up going to the University of Delaware because they had tuition remission, and she was actually able to have her son go to that university with a tuition waiver. We also had, years later, another opportunity to hire somebody, and our top candidate actually was ended up going to a community college. Because of the community college, they were able to offer her a higher salary. We were not able to match her salary, but I am sure that we had the opportunity to offer her something like a tuition waiver. She would have definitely been able to come to BCU, because we found out that she had, we did not ask, but we found out that she had children, and we know that as parents, we might be able to maybe make some sacrifices in terms of not having the higher salary, but as long as we have something for our children, we might be able to make that sacrifice for our children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak in opposition of House Bill 1425? Okay, Delegate, if you want to wrap it up.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman. I spoke before, 90% of universities and colleges have this service. They can control the costs. There are ways to limit it around the time period, participate in exchange programs. I think this is just a really good move. Virginia, we love our universities. We know we have some of the best in the country, and I want to make sure we continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, why faculty? Couldn't we make this same argument for every other state employee that, gee, it would be a lot easier to recruit folks to every single position if we gave them free tuition?
Very good question. At least it starts with faculty. It's about sort of the standard of benefits that we see over the country. And in this point, we want to make sure that we are competitive as universities, from VMI to Richard Bland. We want to make sure that we're competitive. It's standard benefits. Trust me, I agree. I wish this is something we could, pass on to all state employees. But I think this is, something that we need to make sure at least it starts with faculty.
Delegate Poindexter. Oh, please.
Do any of these other universities see, it just seems to me that it creates actually division within the universities. You have the highest paid people getting free tuition for their kids, and the lower paid people not. From a fairness perspective, do other universities see this? You say that so many other universities have this.
And some universities, private universities, for example, do offer this or in different versions for their other staff. But I will say, being a professor myself, the highest paid faculty, many of us are not the highest paid faculty and are making much less than administrators and other staff members. And for us, this is a key component of our ability to sort of maintain our livelihoods. So I think there are equity issues, but on the other hand, there's many of us who are making a little bit more than public school teachers. Thank you.
Delegate Poindexter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Rodney. I've seen this bill 2 or 3 times in the past, I think.
Thank you.
And I said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So this is going to cost the university, and somewhere that money's going to be made up. And we have a terrible tuition increase in the schools. I don't see how this is not going to help raise tuition.
Okay, moving on. Delegate Landis.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion. I move to table the bill.
For a second. Okay, the motion is to lay the bill on the table. Please vote. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Debbie.
Chairman, thank you.
Delegate Christie, please come up and, explain your bill, House Bill 46.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, committee. This is, HB 46 is in-state tuition for students affected by major disaster. Let me just tell you a little bit of background. Our fellow citizens down there in Puerto Rico have been preparing themselves every year. They prepare themselves for a hurricane, and it's kind of part of the life on the island. It's routine. But, they board up their windows, they get their water, they get ready. But this time, something different happened. Hurricane Maria hit. Remember that on September 20th, 6:15 a.m., and it was brutal. If you go down there today, it still looks like a hurricane just hit it the other day. It made landfall, and that Wednesday morning, lives were lost, homes destroyed, and infrastructure damaged beyond imagination. Now we're 5 months later. We've got many areas of the island still are struggling. 38% of homes don't have electricity. What power is available is often intermittent. Roads are potholed, and at night the island is dark. So this bill, HB 46, our Commonwealth can now open its doors to welcome the many uprooted by Hurricane Maria through providing in-state tuition at our higher educational institutions. I'm sure that some struggling students with good academic credentials would seek to come here for educational opportunities if we could give them this helping hand up. Let's support them in their time of need by allowing them for the next 4 years. It's just limited to 4 years to apply as if they are in-state students. That's all this bill does, and I'm sure if the shoe was on the other foot, Puerto Ricans would be giving us that same opportunity if we had a disaster here in Virginia. God help us if that were to happen. So I do have somebody here to testify about Puerto Rico.
Okay, would anyone like to speak in support of House Bill 46? Please, ma'am, please come up and state your name and if you're representing someone.
Yes, my name is Anita Nadal. I'm here as a U.S. citizen of Puerto Rican descent, and I can share with you as an educator and a resident of the state of Virginia for over 17 years that the importance of education, and it is an investment in our future. And just as was mentioned, many are still in the dark. Many still do not have electricity. Many have water at times. A friend of mine was just there for the holidays. The street lights, the stoplights still do not work. So it is still chaos. So there are many young people that are very eager to continue their education, and I know they would be more than happy to come to Virginia Commonwealth. I went to VCU and University of Richmond, so I can share with you that the universities here would be a wonderful way to help our fellow citizens that are living a human crisis at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak in favor? Would anyone like to speak in opposition? Okay, any questions for the delegate?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate South.
I don't know, is there a definition anywhere of a United States territory? Would another state qualify as the United States?
No,
Does it say that
legally it's
anywhere?
only Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
Does it say that anywhere
In the code, yeah.
where
I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I've been told by legislative folks that this is definitely would only be Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands. There's no, I would want to make sure that that didn't open up the door to anything else. Good question.
Any other questions? Okay. Delegate Poindexter.
Keep in mind also it would have to be.
Delegate Poindexter.
Sorry.
Delegate Poindexter, do you have a motion? Motion to PB out of the bill. Is there a second? Any discussion? Please vote on your. That's okay. Take the vote now, please. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
Delegate Price.
Chairman and members of the committee, I'm here on behalf of a segment of Virginians that find it hard to fully participate in our economy and the industries that are being affected by their absence. I'm here to speak to the crushing burden of student loan debt. As of 2017, over 1 million Virginia borrowers owed over $30 billion on student loans. Some Virginians have student loans with interest rates that mimic department store credit cards and more than what is manageable in paying for their education. It is important to note that for every $250 per month in student loan payments, a household's purchasing power is reduced by about $44,000. HB 615 could help approximately 629,000 Virginian borrowers who would benefit from refinancing their student loans and then be able to participate more fully in our economy. HB 615 would establish the Virginia Student Loan Refinancing Authority to facilitate Virginia borrowers refinancing their student loans to help them take advantage of lower interest rates. It would also create a 10-member board that would be responsible for overseeing the authority, setting loan rates, and ensuring revenue off the loans covered the authority's expenses. I already have presented to you the budget amendment for $255,000 for this bill, and I would like to remind you that it is a one-time startup cost, and then the authority would be self-sustaining. And just in closing, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I submit that the borrowers often have done everything that we've asked of them. They've gone to school, most have gotten good grades, and they're learning all they can to prep for the next step in life. But sadly, their next steps in life are being dictated not by what they learned or their passion, but by exorbitant monthly payments for their student loans, and this student loan refinancing authority could help.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to speak in favor of House Bill 615? And if you could, please come up and state your name and if you're representing an organization.
Hi, my name is Desiree Jenkins. I am a graduate of Norfolk State University. My degree is in social work, so I do work in public service in mental health, and this bill would really help. Our field does suffer from a lack of people who want to actually enter into the field because of the fact they have to pay back these loans, so they would like to acquire a job that pays more, and that's just the simple of it. For myself personally, I would like to purchase a home. I'm 25, so like in the next couple of years, that's something I would like to do. But with my loan repayments, I don't qualify for federal repayment or forgiveness program, so a bill like this would really help someone like me.
Ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Anna Scholl in Progress, Virginia. I wanted to share a couple of stories from student loan borrowers who weren't able to be here today, who do support this proposal. The first is from Megan in Fairfax, who graduated in 1999, but saw her loan balance balloon after graduation from $28,000 to $63,000. After, due to economic circumstances, she was unable to find a job and forced into forbearance, where the loan payments that you are not making are added to the principal of the loan, forcing it to balloon that high. And her loans have an 8.25% interest rate, obviously higher than a lot of the common interest rates in the market at the moment. And she shares that I didn't know what options were available to me. My payments are more than I can afford, and it's a constant stress and worry every month when I have to make that payment. And Fatima in Richmond also experienced challenges with her student loans. She was lucky enough to receive lots of grants and scholarships to go to VCU undergrad, and then proceeded to pursue a graduate degree in public policy and amassed more than $50,000 by the time she finished grad school. She says, as luck would have it, I finished up my graduate degrees right at the height of the most recent recession in 2010, making my fear and financial insecurity that much worse when I wasn't able to find a job for almost 4 months after graduating. After what felt like a lifetime and a million job applications, I was elated when I landed a part-time job, and after working on a part-time basis for a year without sick leave or health insurance, I was offered an opportunity for a full-time position. Now, almost 5 years later, I've been promoted 3 times for my hard work and dedication, and make almost 3 times the amount that I did as a part-time employee. Despite my monthly payments, however, my student loan debt has not budged. I'm now approaching my early 30s, and I can't help but compare myself and my situation with the few peers that I have who didn't take on the impediment of student loan debt to go to college. They're busy purchasing their first homes, new vehicles, starting families, or traveling, all of which seems impossibly unreachable because of my student loan debt. What I've learned recently, though, is that my story isn't unique, that for the handful of people I know that were lucky enough to come from backgrounds that avoided taking on student loan debt. I have twice as many peers who are not as fortunate, who, like me, struggle with supporting and trying to build a future for themselves and paying down their student loan debt. The American dream I had for myself and many of my peers is slipping away and quickly turning into a debt-burdened nightmare. In a great country like the United States, this shouldn't be the case. Getting an education should be freeing and empowering, not crippling. It should open up opportunities and pathways for the future, not make them further and further out of reach. I strongly encourage legislators and policymakers to consider just how paralyzing a position myself and my peers are in and how detrimental the impacts of this crippling debt can be on progress for the future. I would just like to flag for you all that there is increasing economic evidence, in particular from the Federal Reserve, that ballooning student loan debt for millennials and for Gen Xers is having a increasing impact on economic growth. As Fatima mentioned, it's holding individuals back from saving for retirement, from buying homes and cars, and from putting that money back into the community. These are folks who, as Delegate Price noted, have done everything right. They've gone to school. For the most part, they've gotten degrees, and they're struggling to make ends meet to pay on those loans, and furthermore, to really make sound investments in their future, oftentimes because interest rates are so high and it's so difficult to get out in front of them.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to House Bill 615? Okay, any questions for the patron?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Landis.
Delegate Price, I'm sympathetic to the student debt issue. I know many constituents contact us about that, but are you aware, if you, I think in Virginia, students borrow about $1.5 billion a year, and the way I think our staff has calculated this, they had a default rate of 10%, and I think in Rhode Island, Vermont, they actually have had a higher default rate for similar programs. But if you had a 10% rate, let's be conservative, the state would be required to pay about $100 million at a cost of $7.5 million annually in debt service, assuming about 4% on the bonds that we issue. Does that concern you at all from the standpoint? I understand we're trying to deal with debt, but then you're also having the state potentially go into debt just based on kind of a conservative estimate related to default on loans that students currently have.
Right, and what we're trying to do here is establish an infrastructure for the industry experts to get together and decide what that would look like. So I'm not standing before you prescribing exactly what loans should not and should not be taken. I'm trying to get the infrastructure built so that we can start the conversation and have the infrastructure for there to be an authority to deal with, even if it were loans that they felt better about entering into a refinancing agreement than not.
Delegate Poindexter.
Yes, quick question, Delegate. Are you aware that there are firms out on the market that do exactly this and reduce the loans, refinancing for the loans?
Yes, and from, Mr. Chairman and Delegate Poindexter, and from anecdotal evidence, and I can also find the hard data, it is very hard, if not impossible, for some to participate in that without additional costs. And so you're still adding to the additional costs for their services.
Delegate Solly. Go ahead.
I'm just not sure how this works. So this group is going to provide loans at a lower rate than folks can get it out in the market.
Yes.
And so the state is underwriting that. The state taxpayers are going to underwrite that, and I guess the cost in the market as such is because of the default rate, right? If the default rate wasn't so high, they would be able to get lower rates. So doesn't that burden all fall on the citizens?
So I think that there are, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Solly, I think there are a myriad of reasons of why there are students that have higher loan interest rates than others. There are some people that have financial situations that, yes, of course, their ability to get a loan is at a higher interest rate. There's some that can get federally subsidized at low interest rates. So this is aiming for the population that has interest rates that mimic credit card stores in the double digits and some of the higher end interest rates. but are still trying to pay back their loan. I would say also that some of the defaults percentages that we're speaking of, there are disparate numbers of defaults in African American communities, and that goes into a myriad of reasons why those loans are being defaulted, not just for failure to pay, but for inability to pay for different reasons that other budget amendments are trying to clarify and rectify.
Thank you. Billy Sally.
Mr. Chairman, I move to pass by indefinitely.
There's a motion, is there a second? Motion is second, that's debatable. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, may I have my 2 minutes?
That's for the committee, but I will let you wrap up.
Thank you. Just in closing, I would say if we are not going to use this vehicle as the solution to the problem, I would love in the interim to have a conversation, because my generation is the generation that no longer understands what generational wealth means. We do not have property to pass on to our children, and our trajectories are looking very different than where yours might have been at our age.
Thank you, Delegate Price. Motion is to pass by indefinitely. It's not on our screen. Okay, please vote. Thank you, Delegate Price. Delegate Turpin, please come up, and I believe there's a substitute. Is that it?
Yes, sir, there's a substitute. Chairman.
We have the substitute in front of you at it's House Bill 1371.
Yes, sir. Chairman, member.
Let's go ahead and get a motion to set the substitute. Motion, is there a second? All in favor of dealing with the substitute, say aye. Opposed? Delegate, your substituted bill is in front of us. Please explain.
All right, thank you so very much. Before I get started, I just want to say that my representative from the Department of Veteran Services is unable to be here today due to illness. And I would also like to have the opportunity to speak with Delegate Torian in regards to his bill to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences. And due to those factors, I would like to offer this to be passed by for the day.
Okay, next time you can just tell me that.
Oh, I'm
You don't have to
sorry.
sit there. Okay, is there a motion to pass by for the day? All in favor of passing House Bill 1371 by for the day, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you so very much.
Delegate Davis.
Yes, sir.
You have two bills in front of us. If you could do House Bill 982.
Sure.
Go ahead and explain your bill.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 982 is a bill that takes a look at the funding for higher education in the Commonwealth of Virginia and does what a number of other states have done, which is applies funding based on performance metrics. So as opposed to just standard funding for a higher education institution, there's a number of metrics that is used to determine funding, including how long it takes to graduate. It's the type of degree, the average wage someone makes after graduation. There could be a whole large factor of metrics that are used to determine the actual funding. What we've seen across the nation is it's a minor adjustment to what the universities actually see in funding. I've noticed probably on the high side maybe a 2% up and maybe a 1.5% down, but it starts to set the framework for kind of guiding, using funding as a way to guide the end result of what we'd like to see from our higher education institutions and our graduates, Mr. Chairman. And we do have a couple people, experts in the industry, that would love to testify and could speak further to the bill.
Okay, would anyone like to speak in favor of House Bill 982? If so, please come up and state your name and represent the organization.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm James Toscano. I'm President for Partners for College Affordability and Public Trust. We support this legislation. We think this is a good step forward. In Virginia, we've tinkered with this concept before in years past, and we've never fully adopted it and used it to apply to our institutions. As the Appropriations Committee and Virginia considers additional investment for higher education institutions in Virginia, we do want to be sure that while we're we're making progress on affordability, that we also have quality. And so we want to make sure that the dollars that we spend result in completion, degree completion, course completion, and that's what about half of that's what half of U.S. states have done already, and so we think this is a good step in that direction. We also don't have to look very far. Virginia community colleges already, without being required by statute, have taken the leap of doing some incentive funding, performance funding on their own as they allocate funds within their system. And so it is possible, although it's been elusive in Virginia, community colleges have proven it's possible. It is complex. There are a number of factors that would be unique to Virginia that may be different than in other states, but it's a conversation that really needs to get going here in Virginia when half of U.S. states have adopted it already. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor of House Bill 982? Is there anyone like to speak in opposition? Please state your name and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is
Like.
Peter Blake. I'm the Director of the State Council of Higher Education. I do not speak in opposition of performance, so I want to make sure Delegate Davis, Chairman, and members know that. This bill introduces a lot of topics that could be of interest. As Mr. Toscano said, it is complicated, would require a little bit of attention. You did, in fact, in 2012, you had some features of these kinds of performance metrics in your funding formula. You had items related to degrees conferred, degrees in STEM and healthcare, timely graduation, the number of degrees that went to underrepresented populations, an efficiency measure, and then a graduation rate measure. So it's not a completely alien concept, but I just think it needs a little bit more time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Any questions for Delegate Davis?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Landis.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering, since this is, Mr. Blake said, since this is a kind of a concept that probably needs a little bit more consideration, just want to know if this might be appropriate to have the Joint Subcommittee on Higher Education of the Senate Finance and House Appropriations Committee look at this further.
That would be a good idea. Any other questions? Motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Doug Solid.
I recommend we lay on the table, if we can also send this to the Higher Education Joint Subcommittee.
Okay, then, all right, the motion is to lay on the table and then send to, place the issue before the Higher Education Joint Subcommittee. Is there a second? Okay, we'll vote. Okay, Delegate Davis. Next is House Bill 1512.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, this.
Delegate Davis, hold on a second. We have a line amendment at your.
Sorry, yes, sir. Sorry.
Anyone like to make the line amendment? Motion. For a second. All in favor of the line amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the prior bill addressed the state funding to our universities. This bill addresses the cost to our students and our students' families. We've all talked for years since I've been up here the need to control tuition costs for those in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The increases have been staggering. I remember when this discussion was had back in the mid-90s, and finally we put a cap on tuition, and the discussion was that the sky's going to fall if we do that, and George Allen and Governor Gilmore did that, and the sky did not fall, and our universities continued to grow and prosper, but one day that cap was released. And Mr. Chairman, I argue that now's the time to look at putting the cap back on tuition, so we can start controlling costs for those in that generation behind us. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, you'll notice that in subsection D of this bill, it also puts a requirement of 75% of the students be in-state students, a discussion point that we've talked about quite often in this body. However, the amendment that you have in front of you would exclude online students from that calculation. Understandably, they're not sitting in the brick and mortar, and I think we should give credit and reward our universities for scaling the online population to help offset some of the costs, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Davis. Anyone like to speak in favor of of House Bill 1512. Please come up and state your name and if you're representing an organization.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. James Toscano, President of Partners for College Affordability and Public Trust. I do have about 2 minutes worth of remarks. So our organization wholeheartedly supports this bill. Unfortunately, the national student debt crisis, now totaling over $1.4 trillion, has hit Virginia. The average baccalaureate degree graduate in Virginia now takes on $30,000 worth of debt. 25% carry $50,000 worth of debt. Economists say the ramifications of significant student debt are real and negative on the economy here in Virginia. Student debt hinders Virginians buying homes, cars, and starting businesses. We're at risk of creating a real economic divide in the Commonwealth of those from wealthy backgrounds whose parents aren't affected by high tuition, and then everybody else. In fact, Virginia workers now work twice as many hours to pay Virginia tuition for the same degrees as they did 15 years ago. The growth in tuition and fees has obviously created the problem. Average tuition and fees in Virginia now ranks 7th highest in the U.S. I'm not here to point the finger at the legislature in terms of state investment. When my friends in the academy do that, they do so and dismiss their central role in holding down cost and price. Plus, as we know from House Appropriations' own analysis 2 years ago, the institutions have raised their tuition $2 for every $1 in state cuts. As the consumer price index over the last 15 years rose around 35%, our universities were busy raising their tuition from anywhere between 150% and 350%. It's true Virginians value their colleges and universities, but they also believe they're unaffordable. In a Mason-Dixon statewide poll we ran in September, we learned only 10% trust the institutions to set their own tuition. Over 75% of Virginians want policymakers to intervene and limit or reduce tuition. As a former higher education administrator, I can tell you, when you step out of the higher education administrator bubble and begin connecting with real people, you realize how concerned people are deeply, and now I know that. I've heard directly from hundreds of Virginians just in the last few weeks, and they tell me that 1 penny more is 1 penny too much. When the institutions raise tuition even $1, the average graduate in Virginia will pay off that extra dollar more than 13 years from now. Tuition freeze would provide the relief that Virginians need. In conclusion, let's be clear, tuition freeze is not pro-institution or anti-institution. It's pro-citizen. Tuition freeze imposes no restraints when it comes to providing institutions with direct state appropriations. If 23 other states in the U.S. can freeze tuition to provide relief to their citizens, so can Virginia. We need institutions in the legislature to come together to solve this problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor of House Bill 1512? Anyone like to speak in opposition? If so, please come up and state your name and organization.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Peter Blake. I'm with the State Council of Higher Education. We certainly support affordable access. In fact, the #1 goal within the Virginia Plan for Higher Education is affordable access. So we are all in favor of the efforts of Mr. Davis, Delegate Davis, and others. However, SHEV has historically opposed tuition caps of these types, in part because the whole question about affordable access is a shared responsibility, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. This looks at one side of the equation, and that's the institutional cost. There's also a state responsibility, we believe also a student and family responsibility. So it's a multifaceted issue around affordability. This looks at one piece of it. I would suggest that we could be more productive by looking at this a little more holistically. Second, this treats all institutions the same. So you have higher price institutions and lower price institutions, and when you put a single cap in place for all of them, then it affects them disproportionately. And for that reason, we believe that these decisions are best left at the institution.
Okay, anyone else like to speak in opposition? Any questions for Delegate Davis? Delegate Point?
Mr. Chairman, this sort of looks like the previous bill to me, and Delegate Davis has some good ideas in here, but we don't know enough about it, so I think we ought to send it up to the Higher Education Joint Subcommittee. I would make that motion.
Okay, is there a second? Motion is to table the bill and send to the Higher Education Joint Subcommittee. It's motion and been seconded. All, please vote. Thank you, Delegate Davis.
Thank you very much.
We'll keep you involved when this comes up before the joint subcommittee.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Meares. House Bill House Bill 1473. Please explain the bill.
Yes, HB 1473 simply requires bodies of Virginia public colleges and universities to accept public participation, including public comment, at a board meeting prior to them instituting a tuition hike. We do have Dr. James Toscano is here to testify as well on this bill, but this again goes to this entire notion, I think, of allowing the stakeholders, the people that are affected by the tuition hike, to have input to those bodies that are making those decisions. Oftentimes it can have crippling financial impact on those families. So I'm somebody who believes that more information is better than less information. And I think it's critical for those bodies to hear from those that are directly affected by it. And this is a smart, effective, good government bill. And if it's the pleasure of the body, pass it on. And Mr. Scott, do you highlight it? Yeah, any questions?
I'll call for
Okay, I'm sorry.
Would anyone like to speak in favor of House Bill 1473? Please come up and state your name and organization you may represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be real brief. Thank you so much for hearing this bill today. We appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate Delegate Diarra's leadership on this issue. This is a good governance measure. We wholeheartedly support this measure. More students and parents with voices in the decision-making process only strengthens decision-making. It is consistent with the way that the Commonwealth treats boards and agencies throughout Virginia. We have boards and agencies that are much smaller enterprises than our great institutions that have public comment requirements, and this makes the law consistent and requires public comment, which we think is a real positive thing, bringing student and parents' voice in the process. Thank you again.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor of House Bill 1473? Anyone like to speak in opposition? Okay.
Report, second.
Motion to report is second. We'll vote on the electronic board. Thank you, Delegate. Next up is Delegate Simon.
This is a big time.
Delegate Simon, let's go ahead and do House Bill 968.
Mr. Chairman, nice to see. I think that's Virginia Student Loan Authority.
It is.
Yeah, I understand y'all heard of a similar one and had some misgivings about that, so I moved to strike my bill.
Hey, there's, you can't make that motion.
I would ask if
Is
someone
there-
would go ahead and strike that bill. I understand the decision.
Second.
Motion is to strike the bill, and that is a recorded vote, so any discussion on that? Okay, let's go ahead and pull that up and vote. Okay, that bill is struck. House Bill 339.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What this bill does, this is actually one of those ripped from the headlines bills. I know that you don't always like to legislate based on a single episode, but the newspaper article that was proposed was, I think, symbolic or emblematic of a larger problem, which is that students who fall behind on their tuition bills, or their books, or their books to on their bills to universities, and get caught up being 60 days late, they were automatically getting kicked over to private collections officials, which automatically would result in 30% fee being added. So you might go from having a $3,000 bill that you were behind on, it's turned over to collections, and it instantly turns into a $4,000 bill, just like that. When you're still enrolled in the university, you're still trying to go to classes, you're still trying to make good. All this bill does, House Bill 339, is give the university the options to continue to do their own collection practices, continue to take care of that in-house, continue to work with the students to get caught up, so that they're not required to kick it over to private collection agencies.
House Bill 1339 is, anyone like to speak in favor of this? Anyone like to speak in opposition?
Move report.
Move to report and second. Any discussion? All in favor, use your electronic voting board.
what this does is set a standard, and not only for rigor, but also for those credits that would be gained through the dual enrollment program, so that students would be guaranteed, working through SHEV is going to develop this with the Department of Education and our institutions of higher learning, so that not only the rigor is the same for our dual enrollment classes, but more importantly, the credits assigned to those dual enrollment classes would apply equitably to any institution of higher learning. That's simply what the legislation does.
Okay, anyone like to speak in favor of House Bill 3? Please come up and briefly, well, you can state your name, but be brief, please. The next committee is getting ready to start.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ellen Davenport with the Virginia Community College System. We support the bill. There was a JLARC study last fall that identified 5 dual enrollment recommendations, and Delegate Landis' bill would implement many of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Laura Cornash, representing the school superintendents of Virginia, and we think this bill goes a long way into increasing transparency for students and families, and we've been working with SHEV and community colleges on strengthening dual enrollment.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Beverly Covington with SHEV, and we support the bill. We've been working on dual enrollment issues. We're happy to add this quality piece, which is very important.
Thank you. Anyone like to speak in opposition? Motion is to report. It's been seconded. Please vote.